it didn't matter whether I sent her for a high tea, whether she had crumpets, whether she had English muffins, whether she had cupcakes.
It wasn't going to fucking work.
Either way, it didn't fucking work. Yeah. Hello, 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 and welcome to Well Shit. It really is that simple. I'm Claire.
And I'm Serena. On this podcast, we help you to understand about your 12 universal needs, why they are currently not being well met,
how to meet them in ways that work for you, and how to consistently do so in quick, easy, and simple ways that fit seamlessly into your life.
We'll also help you to understand how doing so will have a positive ripple effect in literally every area of your life.
If you like what you hear, sign up for more support with meeting your needs with your weekly Universal Needs Notes at theuniversalneeds.com.
And enjoy the show.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hey, everyone.
There are so many exciting things going on at our end right now. It's really kind of interesting, like all the stuff that's going on behind the scenes. Like we have so much we want to share with you, and we can't share like all the detail just yet. But suffice to say that we have 3 massive projects that we are working on right now.
Actively working on.
Because
they've been projects that have been in the
pipeline.
In the pipeline, in the wings, but all of a sudden they're about to make their
on
debut.
Deck. So I'll let you know like what's with limited scope. So we are working on a self-study version of our signature program, which will be completely online. It will be available on a sliding scale basis, so you'll be able to pick the price point that's appropriate for where you're at. We're also working on the book, which I'm so excited about. And there's some exciting things related to the book. We're not going to tell you what those are just yet, but there are some really exciting things related to the book. And then next up is the TED Talk. Yeah. So hopefully within the next year, all 3 of those will drop.
Yeah, actually, by the time this one airs, at least one of those might be steadily on its way. Do I have more
Which one?
Well, the program.
Yeah, but we got to do the group part of it as well.
Stay tuned. It's coming.
There will be significant progress between recording and launching. So we will be sharing more about this. And obviously, like if you're interested in any of those, then please follow our social media. We will let you know all about those things over there. But yeah, it's kind of exciting to see that those things are going to be coming to fruition way sooner than I think we thought they would.
Oh, definitely. Well, the way things work in our world, yeah, I want to say like feast or famine, but it's like, it's not even really that. It's just like ideas, and all of a sudden they come together, the stars align, and it's a beautiful thing.
And it's funny because like we've been talking about these and there've been like various ideas, and then all of a sudden it kind of all crystallized in like one conversation, and we were like, oh, we're nearly there on quite a few of these things now.
And it's a conversation that started at the end of like one of those days where we were just like, fuck this shit. Let's done.
Just be done.
Like, we're going to call it early. We were both like, blah, just like in blah, just general spaces. And then all of a sudden we start talking, and like 3 hours later, we're like, oh shit, like look at us go.
Restructured the business. We like did our business plan. I'm like, oh, hold on. These projects are like active, like really active and program like this. And I gotta tell you, like no matter like which version of this you end up looking at, they look amazing thanks to this lady sat next to me right now. I mean, there's and if you have done any work with us before now, it's all like there's so much new content that is in this new version of the program. It's like I'm really excited about that, and it just looks chef's kiss. Can't wait to share with you. But we're not talking about that today.
No.
Today we are talking about something that so many people battle with and struggle with in a number of different ways. And I think that as somebody who has had both an active inner critic and an active inner saboteur pretty much my entire life. Sorry, I'm just had to go and check record because the last time we started recording this episode, we got halfway through and realised we didn't hit record, but we did today. Yay! So carry on. So yeah, I've had a very active inner critic and a very active inner saboteur, and people sometimes use these phrases interchangeably, but in actual fact, there is a distinction between the two. We'll get into that in a little bit, and unsurprisingly, it's a needs-based discernment between the two.
You don't say.
I know. Shock. Horror. How on earth could that? Yeah. Anyway. So I think that the bigger one for me was probably the inner critic. That was probably the most present one throughout my life. And as somebody who's been involved in personal growth and development for more years than I care to mention, I had been given all manner of suggestions of how to deal with my inner critic. None of them worked. But I mean, kind of absurd, some of them as well. Like one of them I was told, the first one, I think I was told to banish my inner critic. Like banish my inner critic. Like out the door, out the window, never to be heard of ever again.
Because it's that easy.
Yeah, that didn't work. I also got told to tell her to shut up. Just every time she spoke, shut up, not interested. I got told to tell her to sit in the corner and have a cup of tea.
That's such an English thing.
But the funny thing was, it wasn't an English person that told me to do that. It was an American person. I was like, that's someone who's watched too much Downton Abbey, I think, or whatever, Sense and Sensibility or whatever.
Well, I guess they recommended a cup, not a spot. So, do you say that, a spot of tea? Like, is that an Americanized British thing?
Mean, you don't. I mean, it's not common parlance in my neck of the woods, and I've not really had. I mean, and I've lived in different areas around the country, and I've moved around the country. I can see potentially that someone might say that, but it's certainly not common language.
Because I feel like that's what goes perfectly with a crumpet.
You know, any cup of tea goes good with a crumpet. Like, as a girl who does like a crumpet or two.
I can't wait to actually go over and go across the pond and try a proper crumpet. I don't think Thomas's English muffins have anything like.
But a muffin and a crumpet, they're completely different.
Do you know what an English muffin is?
Well, yeah, we have English muffins with a Benedict.
Yes.
Yeah, that's not a crumpet.
That's
no, we're going to sidetrack here momentarily. So an English muffin, that we would call that an English muffin too. Like that would be called you would still refer to that as like a muffin. Although we also refer to muffins as a kind of cupcake adjacent thing, which I think you do over here as well.
What you mean me when I ordered like cake for breakfast and I'm like, can we call it a muffin? And they're like, it's a cake. And I'm like, can we call it a muffin so I can eat it? And they're like, here's your muffin, ma'am. And I'm like, thank you. I will enjoy this delicious breakfast.
But no, a crumpet is it's the same sort of thickness as a muffin, but it's I don't even know what's made. It's an entirely different experience. It's full of bubbles, and so there's like lots of air pockets in it.
So different than the nooks and crannies.
I mean, there's lots of nooks and crannies in a crumpet.
That's the marketing for Thomas's English muffins. It's all about the nooks and crannies of the English muffin.
You got more nooks and crannies in a crumpet than a muffin, I'll tell you that. But the good thing with the crumpet is that if you put like butter or jam on the top of it, it goes into the little hot pockets of holes. So and the butter melts. Oh my god, it's so good. In fact, but I don't think crumpets are vegan. We'll have to find some vegan ones. Or just make them. Anyway,
back to the episode.
Well, actually, no, we're not back to the episode because the next thing I'm going to say is we'll be back soon, folks. Just don't mind us. The other thing is that when you come to England, we'll have to go and have a Cornish and a Devonish cup cream tea because they're different. So we have a cream tea, which is like sandwiches, and you have oh my goodness, I'm having a blank. A scone.
I knew it. I knew that's what you were going to say.
Look at you.
Look at me with my
but
UK.
different areas of the country with different ways of putting them together. So on one area of the country, I don't remember which is which, but on one area of the country, you put on the jam first and then the clotted cream. And then the other, it's like clotted cream and then jam. And there's like a big debate over which is the better one. It happens in so many places around the world.
Joe and I like to get tea. Like that's one of like those weird things that you probably wouldn't look at us as a couple and be like, they like to go drink tea together. like when we travel the country, like that's one of the things we do. We go to tea shops and stuff, and like we're always drinking tea. And there's a little tea place where I grew up, and we went there with my aunt one time, and we're sitting there, and has different cups of tea because he's making it in the different ways. He's like, well, this one I'm gonna put my milk in first, and then I put and I think there was like 6 different ways, and he's taking pictures. Like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm on a tea chat, and I'm showing all the different ways to make the tea. So that's what that made me think of. Like,
oh my god! And it's funny because like it depends. Like milk in first is only if you would brew it in a pot. Like you wouldn't put milk in first and then put. I mean, some people do this. It's wrong.
I just know I've been told I'm like the Dutch. I like it black tea.
Oh, okay.
Apparently I was told in Ireland that's the Dutch way to drink it. I was like, sure.
Anyway, back from our tea and various baked goods tangent, we're coming back to the inner critic. So, and it didn't matter whether I sent her for a high tea, whether she had crumpets, whether she had English muffins, whether she had cupcakes.
It wasn't going to fucking work.
Either way, it didn't fucking work. Yeah. None of this, it didn't matter what I tempted her with. She had no interest whatsoever in the cup of freaking tea. So there were all of these different ways I was told to deal with my inner critic. And the inner critic, I think most of us are well aware of. It's that part of us. It's the negative self-talk. It's that part of us that is constantly telling us that we're screwing up, that we're not doing enough, that we suck, that we are not successful enough, that we haven't done enough, that we've got it wrong, or there's something wrong with us. And it's that pattern of talking to ourselves in that way. Now, how that works, like obviously depending on how your brain processes information, like you might see it in images, you might actually hear it like objectively, it sounds like you're talking to yourself. You might just think it, like there might be like the words come through in thoughts. So it can be all different ways of it showing up, but it's basically something saying you're not doing a good enough job, or there's something about you or something that you've done that is wrong. And it's not like it's not like a momentary acknowledgement of the fact that something hasn't been done right or there was a better way of doing something. It's like this constant barrage of verbal abuse of that, like, how could you do that? You're so stupid. Why would you let that happen? Blah, 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 blah. And a lot of that is, sorry, I've got hiccups again. I don't know why I keep getting hiccups on the podcast. A lot of this is created by conditioning of what we've been taught, what we've seen, the culture that we're in. So that might be to do with teachers, it might be to do with parents, it might be to do with society, it might be to do with movies, it might be to do with social media. It might just be this kind of constant comparison that we have to everybody else in the world. Like if you think about the Instagram factor, where it's like, well, why don't I look like that? Why, like you're not skinny enough.
Because they don't look like that.
That's exactly. Yes.
Like why can't I achieve that? Because they haven't done it either. I'm like, get some Photoshop, you'll be good.
You know, we have the no. I think there's just a yes. Like that's just a yes. Fact. And the thing is that there's this belief, and it's that like bombardment of messages that we are not good enough, thin enough, sexy enough, successful enough, a good enough mother, a good enough daughter, good enough son, a good enough friend.
Making enough money. Like,
yeah.
That's a huge one. That's a huge one that the inner critic, I feel like, and a lot of us likes to be like, it's like, money.
Yeah.
It's like, money. Because there are these pinnacles that we are taught through our conditioning in our society that it's like this is what it should look like.
Right, absolutely. And the inner critic is that part of us that it kind of goes down that spiral. And if you've listened to the guilt and shame series, the tends to happen with the inner critic is something that starts off as a guilt scenario flips very quickly to a shame scenario. So guilt is a behavior. I have done something wrong. And if you respond to guilt appropriately and listen to it, guilt is your humanity talking to you. Guilt is like, I've done something wrong to this other person. I feel bad because I don't want to do something wrong to another person, or I don't want to have harmed another person. And if you listen to that and act on it, guilt can be a great motivator for rectifying what's happened and ensuring that doesn't happen again in the future. So guilt can be a really good thing if we relate to it as this is feedback and it's telling me something so that I can learn and grow and do better. Now, so guilt is I've done something wrong. Shame is there is something wrong with me. And a lot of the times, guilt very quickly morphs into shame. And especially when the inner critic is present, the difference between guilt is like, oh, I tripped over and broke the step. I don't know where that I don't know what example that was.
That is a hard trip.
That's a hard trip. I think it's because I've got a broken step out the back of my house right now, and that's where it came from. I tripped up and broke a step. That is okay, I've done something like, how am I going to rectify that? Now I'm going to fix it. I'm going to go and get the materials and what have you. I'm going to apologize to, maybe if it's not my step, it's somebody else's step. I'm going to apologize to the person whose step it was and I'm off to pay for it, all those sorts of things. Shame is, well, see, you're such a klutz. Like this, that's something wrong with me, as opposed to I have done something wrong. You're a loser. How could you let that happen? You're too heavy. You're too, like, you know what I mean? Like, all of those sorts of things. It's about who you are. And that shame spiral, once that starts, especially from the inner critic, it's like, like it plummets.
It is quick.
And it's unrelenting. It is a pretty constant process. And what ends up is you end up at the bottom of a pit, not really able to get out. And you still have, while you're at the bottom of that pit, that inner critic is normally at the top, still shouting down at you. What the fuck are you doing down in the pit? Get out that pit. Like you shouldn't be in a pit right now. Blah, 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 blah. And a lot of this, like this can sometimes happen. I've noticed this happen in dynamics where, if for example, you have, say I had done something wrong I'd harmed Serena in some way. Okay, here's a great example. This happened this morning, where I've got some stuff going on right now that I'm dealing with, but it means that my delivery sometimes in how I'm articulating things is sharper and shorter than it is usually. And Serena was like, she was trying to explain something to me, and I said something like, I don't understand that. But it wasn't just I don't understand that. It was like, I don't understand that. Like it was a sharper version of it. So in that situation, I've done something wrong to Serena. So if Serena then comes to me and points that out, which she did, there are two things. There are two kind of trajectories that tend to happen from that point. One is I make it about Serena, and I'd be like, okay, I'm so sorry. What can I do? That's not how I want to operate with you. I want to do things differently in the future, and I need to be mindful of what I need to do in order to rectify that going forward, which I'm pretty sure is some in the region of what actually happened. Yeah. That conversation happened this morning.
Long story short.
Yes. However, what can often happen in that situation is that immediate recognition of I've done something wrong, it switches on the inner critic. And the inner critic starts focusing on me. And it's like, oh my God, I can't believe I've done this. I'm such a terrible person. How could I do that? Blah, 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 blah. And it's this internal shame spiral. But the problem is that when that happens and I'm on an internal shame spiral, Serena, who is the one who has been harmed, now has to deal with the fact that I'm in a shame spiral. No, not only am I not making things right with her, I'm actually creating a situation where there's more labor on her to deal with me being in the process where I'm focusing on myself. Now, I'm not saying focusing on myself in a good way. And it's not like it's all about me right now. This is awesome. It's more like, oh God, this is terrible. I'm awful. I've screwed up. There's nothing I can do. I'm useless. That's what the inner critic tends to do, is like tend to send you down that shame spiral. Not only does it hurt you, but if you're in a situation with somebody else, a lot of the time it can actually cause further harm to the person who you're actually engaging with. So like the inner critic it seems like it would only be something that affects us, but actually it can have a ripple effect on the people around you. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a couple of ways in which the inner critic kind of morphs into reality, because I don't believe, now I'm not an expert on this, but I do not believe that children are born with an inner critic. I don't believe that part is present in children, because you only have to see how willing they are to try and fuck up and just get back up and carry on again, to realize that they're not that when they do screw up or they do make a mistake or it doesn't work, they don't let it stop them, generally speaking. They just keep on going. Like, especially when they're toddlers, like when they're infants and they haven't really developed language yet and they're not interacting at a language level or at a linguistic level. which means that this is a learned behavior. And there are several instances of like how this can show up. Like one of the examples I often imagine in my head of like how an inner critic often is with that is like the boot camp supervisor, like that yelling, scolding, demeaning someone to try to motivate them to do better. But in actual fact, it's just abusive. And that's what the inner critic is, generally speaking. It's self-abuse. And so there's an example that like you have from your like childhood, right? Where an external voice actually became an internal one, right?
Yeah, I didn't realize it until probably a couple of years ago. Like, it's one of those things I always kind of, it resonated, but like there was this voice in my head that would say certain things, and it's like, okay, finally I identified it as my grandmother's voice. And it's like, and then as you kind of unravel it, it's like, oh, I remember this from my childhood, and this, and this, and this. And I'm like, oh shit. Like, and it's one of those things, like my grandmother loved me dearly. She never, like, she'd be appalled if she knew that this is how it affected me in the long run. But it's something that from my childhood, I carried through into adulthood, into like the space of the last couple of years, when I'm like, finally like, oh,
that's where that came from.
And being able to
have a cup of tea, Grandma.
Pretty much, pretty much. So like,
we have a better strategy, by the way. We're not leaving you with a cup of tea.
No. We're gonna give you a crumpet too. Yeah. I had to. So like once I actually identified, like, wait a minute, this isn't my voice. Like, I know whose voice this is. I was able to unravel it and to be like, okay, all right, that's where that's coming in. That's actually not true. That was never true.
Right.
And then you have the processing of, oh shit, for the last however many years, that wasn't true, but it was a dialogue that circled my head over and over and over again.
And it was because it's something that circled your head over and over and over again, you probably believed it to be true.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And before you actually audited it and went, hold on, whoa, that's not me.
Oh yeah, that external critic became my internal critic, and then all of a sudden it was my voice, and I didn't hear her saying it, was me saying it to myself.
Right.
And I didn't even believe it, but I had been so conditioned into it that in a sense you did.
Yeah, absolutely. There was another example of like where this sort of thing can come from is I had a schoolmate at school, funnily enough.
You don't say.
I mean, it's shocking, I know, but that's where we knew each other from. So yes, major eye roll. If you're listening on the podcast, you probably heard that. So anyway, she was someone who was like consistently at the top of the class. She was like consistently high scores. Like she would score like 97 or 98% on pretty much everything. It was really annoying. Like, I wish I could do that. I was not that academically inclined in that respect. I mean, I did pretty well, but I was definitely not in that. That was not my experience. In fact, I remember when my university offers came through when I was applying for university, that one came through and it required 2 A's and a B at A level. My mum said literally she watched me open it up, scrumple it up and put it straight in the bin, because I'm like, that ain't happening. Like, there's no way that's going to happen. So anyway, what I found, the thing that broke my heart about this was like, here was a girl who was such an incredibly high performer as far as like test scores were concerned. But every time she would go home, the first question out of her parents' mouths were, and her dad specifically was, what were the 2% you got wrong? What was the 3% you got wrong? So she got 98% correct. And all she was told to focus on, all she was taught to focus on, was what she'd got wrong. And this is a really easy way of establishing very low self-worth, because you're not recognizing the huge achievement. You're focusing on the teeny tiny mistakes or errors or gaps in knowledge.
Especially when that voice is family and somebody that close to you. And as a child, like that's what you know is your safety.
Right.
Like,
well, also that like there's this assumption that most children have, which is that my parents have all the answers. They know the right way of doing things. They are right. and they're teaching me the way to do life. I mean, we don't have that explicit thought necessarily, they're teaching me, but we learn how to do life by, like, it never, like most of us, up to a certain point in our development, would never occur to us to question whether that's right or wrong. That's just how that's how you do it, because that's how my parents do it, and my parents know everything. Like, that's a lot of the time how we relate to these things. So we don't question it. We just assume that is how we're meant to do it. And it's how we then tend to do it as we go forward. We take that forward unless we do something to actually change these patterns of behavior. So what is the inner critic when it comes to needs? We'll do inner critic first, then we'll come back to saboteur. So needs lens time. When you put the needs lens on the inner critic, the reason that the processes that I'd been given and the techniques and approaches for dealing with the inner critic didn't work is because you have to understand, what is the inner critic trying to achieve? Now, contrary to popular belief, we're not all sadomasochistic. We do not want to cause pain to ourselves for the sake of causing pain. There is a purpose behind this approach. And the inner critic, 99.999% of times, in my experience of working with clients, the inner critic is trying to get our needs met. It is just using a really, really, really fucked up strategy for doing it. Because what's happening is the inner critic is basically saying, I'm afraid that these needs aren't going to get met. Like, this is all happening subconsciously. The inner critic sits across the tea table from you and goes over a little cuppa and a crumpet. Listen here, mate. I'm trying to meet some needs here. Could you sort it out?
I feel like their pinky would be up as well.
Yes. So many images right now. That's not what's happening at a conscious level, but subconsciously what's happening is the inner critic is they're afraid that needs are not going to get met. And because of our conditioning throughout our entire lives, there is the belief, this part of us has a belief that if we are perfect, that our needs will get met, because that is a very common misperception in our culture. And this part of us, because of the conditioning, because what we've seen from others and how we're conditioned, believes that negative stimulation is the way to get us to be perfect. Like, that's how to motivate us. There is a part of us that believes that if we feel shitty enough about the fact that we are not doing something, or we're not good enough, or we aren't the way that we're meant to be, that if we feel shitty enough about it, that we will actually do something about it, and then we will be good enough, and then our needs will be met. The problem is that because we talked about in previous episodes, we all have this kind of underlying feeling of not enough because of our society and because of our conditioning. So the problem is that a lot of the time, that doesn't act as a motivation. What it does is it reinforces an already held belief that, I don't know why, but my bra's really uncomfortable right now. I've been trying to do this subtly, and I'm like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just
call it for what it is.
I'm just gonna say what I'm doing, because I'm like fidgeting around, and people will be like, what the fuck is she doing?
Sometimes bras are uncomfortable.
Oh, man, I don't know why this is one. No, anyway, sorry. I just had to name that, because otherwise people are gonna be watching YouTube going, what is she doing right now? I see an elbow in Serena's screen. What is happening? So okay, I think we're sorted. So the thing about it is that what happens is that negative abuse actually just lands on that belief that we already have, that we're not good enough, which compromises our self-worth even more, which compromises our value need even more. And a lot of the time, what that ends up doing is that ends up working against us meeting our needs. We've talked about the symbiotic spiral between self-worth and needs many times, where if you have low self-worth and you don't meet your needs because you don't believe you're worthy of having them met, and because you don't meet them, you feel less worthy of them being met, which means that you meet them less, and blah, 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 that symbiotic relationship down. There's, as we've talked about, there is also one that goes the other direction, which is even if we don't believe we're worthy of needs, of having our needs met, if we meet them, that gets internalized often as, oh, well, actually, I'm a bit more worthy of meeting them, and a bit more worthy of meeting them means you'll meet them more, which means that you'll feel a bit more worthy, and so that upward spiral works as well. But with the inner critic, there really is no upward spiral; it's all downward. And so what it does is that it creates this shame spiral, which means that we don't feel worthy. We don't believe in ourselves, that we don't think we can do any better. And then what ends up happening is this part of us gets even louder, because it then goes like, no, you need to I need to make you understand even more how much you need to take care of these needs. And I need to make you feel clearly you don't feel shitty enough yet. Mm-hmm. If I can make you feel shittier, then maybe you'll finally do something about it. But it undermines our value need again, which compromises our desire to do anything about it, which then makes us feel shittier, which means that she gets louder or they get louder, and so on and so forth and so on and so forth. So this is the thing, is that the inner critic is just trying to get our needs met. And I didn't find an effective way of addressing my inner critic until I put a needs lens on the situation. Because when I put a needs lens on the situation, I could see this was a part of myself that was scared. It's a part of myself that was afraid that my needs weren't going to be met, or that they were going to be compromised in some way. And all she was doing was learning from that conditioning that maybe by feeling shit about something, it might motivate me to do something about it. And the truth of the matter is that there is an element of truth in that at one level. It's like, if we don't have something we want, there's a feeling associated with not having that thing that we want. And sometimes that feeling of not having that is the thing that motivates us to do something about it. But when that starts to then, say I don't have, say I don't have the ability to play the guitar, and I kind of feel a little sad about the fact that I don't have the ability to play the guitar. Like, I really want to play the guitar, and that feeling of I don't have that yet often is the motivating factor to be like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to go take guitar lessons, because that's something I don't have. It's not something that I'm not. And when it becomes about something that I'm not, that's when the shame kicks in. That's when it hits our value need. And once our value need gets compromised, it very rarely is it increase our ability to do things. A lot of the time that's quite debilitating. Mm-hmm. And it compromises our desire, it compromises our belief in ourselves, it compromises so many of the elements that actually gets us to do things. So you can start kind of see the logic as to why it takes this approach, but it doesn't realize there's a difference between, oh, I feel this thing because this need isn't met, and if I did this thing it would meet that need and that would feel really cool, so I'm going to do that thing now. And there is something wrong with me as a human being, which then undermines a lot of what we need to then actually have the faith in ourselves and the belief in the fact that we deserve to have our needs met to then do something about it. So it's a really screwed up system. And when I first kind of figured this out, this was something anyone told me. This was something I figured out for myself. Unsurprisingly, needs related. That tends to be the case. And so what ended up happening was, when I had the needs sense, I actually started to have a conversation with this part of me. Now, I know that sounds a little bit weird.
Not to me.
Not now.
No.
How did it sound the first time I suggested this?
You keep doing your needs thing over there.
I don't want no part of it. Like, that sounds ridiculous. I feel stupid doing that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Because now I talk to that. I talk to her all the time. I'm like, I hear you, and no, we're going to handle this a little differently.
So that's basically, and there's lots of different ways of doing it. You can do it with a visualization. You can do it through a journal with like different colored pens for the different parts of you. So you can be like, inner critic is one part, and like you, like your adult self is a different part, and you can have a conversation. You can do it just in your head. Like, you can just have a conversation of like, what is it that you are, like, when you hear that part saying in your ear, like, okay, I can hear you there. What is it that you're afraid of? What need are you trying to meet right now? And especially when you have the needs understanding of what the needs are, that gives like a common language for you to have this conversation with this part of yourself. So it's not just like, what do you want? Because that's a different question. Like, what need are you trying to meet, or what needs are you trying to meet? That's a more helpful question, because it identifies something that you then have the ability to do something about. Because once you know what your needs are and how to meet them, then you've got the power to change that without using this strategy that they've been employing for all these years. So you can have this conversation with this part of you and be like, okay, so talk to me. What is it that you're trying to achieve right now? What needs are you trying to meet right now? What needs are you afraid are not going to be met? And eventually, like, that part will be like, oh, this need. Okay, I understand that. I hear you. I'm going to ask that for you to trust me. I'm going to take care of those needs. You don't have to worry about them not being met, because I'm going to take care of them. Are you like, can we use this approach rather than, I get that you think this shitty strategy is going to work. Trust me, we've been doing this for however many years, 40 plus years, 20 plus years, however many years you've been doing this. Can we try a different approach? And I hear you and I know what needs you're worried about, and I'm going to take care of those needs. And the good thing is that once you know your needs and you know how to do it, you can reassure them really quickly, because you can be like, I got this. Look, see, let's do this. Let's do this. And I will continue to take care of those needs. It's not a one and done with these ones, because that intensity is there. Normally it's not like a one and done. It's a, I'm afraid that this is never going to get met, or that if I take my foot off the gas for a second, that you're not going to be taking care of them and that need's going to get compromised. So it's about consistently taking care of those needs. And when you consistently take care of those needs, all of a sudden that voice starts to quieten and starts to get more peaceful. And once that part of you learns that you are going to listen to them, then they're more likely to just talk to you and be like, hey, dude, this thing over here, can we look at this, please? Rather than, you loser, like, which is the approach it was taking before. Once it knows it's going to get heard, and that you have the ability and you will take care of those needs, the dialogue becomes much more fluid, right?
Yeah, I have to say my needs menu really helped me a lot in that process, because your inner critic's going to be skeptical, especially when you first start doing this process and this work.
Skeptical AF.
Yeah, understatement. But once
it's a little bit like the inner child. They also skeptical AF to begin with.
Yes. I'm like, AF. I'm like, oh, yeah. PG version here. But the needs menu, because we've probably talked about the needs menu in just a little passing glossed over, but it gives you different options of meeting needs. So as I've said many times before, 99.9% of the time, one thing may work. And then there's that 0.01% where it doesn't. My inner critic would focus on that. But what if it doesn't? But what if it doesn't? Well, if it doesn't, then I'll try this and this or this or this. And like, my inner critic can see all of these things on the page, and it's like.
And the thing, just to add to how you describe the needs menu, is the needs menu is not a generic thing that gets provided to all people. No. It's not like a list of things. It is created through a process that we take clients through to help them to identify what are the ways of meeting this need that will work specifically for them. Because the things on my needs menu and the things on Serena's needs menu are different. Because we've figured out here are the things. So even more so, your inner critic knows, not only do I have a list of options for ways of meeting needs, like a generic list of options, I have a list of options that I know particularly work for me, which like that reassurance amplifies exponentially once those are needs that are unique ways of meeting needs that are unique or specific to you, versus just, we'll try this, we'll try this, we'll try this, we'll try this, but actually we don't know whether any of these are going to work.
Yeah, it's almost like if you can envision the inner critic sitting there, and it's like, if it's a generic list, they're like, yeah, all right, okay, yeah, whatever. No, we'll see this fail. But it's like, when you say things, it's like, I'm going to try this, it's like, oh,
well, that might work.
That does sound kind of nice. Like, and then it's like, and if it didn't, it's like, well, that didn't work. And it's like, all right, yeah, well, let's try this one. Okay, I see what you're saying here. And it does, like, I realize now it does probably sound
kind of silly.
It's kind of silly, but having that, those dialogues with yourself, because that inner critic is having its dialogue with you, whether you're.
And that inner critic is a part of you.
Yes. Like, it's not going to go anywhere. It's just to the level of your relationship with it, really. Like,
and also you can actually take that conversation, if you want, to another level. So the first level is you're going to have that conversation and you say, I've got this and here are these ways I'm going to do it. The other thing is that you can take the needs menu to them and go, which of these ways would feel good to you?
And that's a really interesting way to do it, because sometimes that's usually when new things get added to my needs menu, because I'm like, for some reason I feel like snuggling my niggle monster is gonna help this need right now. And it's like,
I can't think there are many needs that won't be made better by snuggling a niggle monster, from my little Clearing Niggles friendship series episode.
But like, and it might seem weird, and then you do it and you're like, oh, actually this feels
feel good.
Soft, this is nice. And it's, like, listen to them. listen to the inner critic, take what they're saying. Don't, and that's another thing in the process. I think this is where I was getting with it. There was oftentimes I kind of discounted the inner critic's suggestion. I'm like, shut up, I've listened to you for too long. Like, you have nothing good to say. And it's like, actually, they do have something good to say. It's just maybe the manner they're, the inner critic is going about it.
It's like anybody. If anyone was yelling abuse at you, chances are you're probably not going to be listening to them very well. Mm-hmm. But when you realize that part is a part of you and they're trying to get you to hear something because you're not aware of it, at that point, your motivation for finding a way of communicating with them changes dramatically. Mm-hmm. And when you get to that point, you're like, okay, yeah, I hear you. Yeah, okay. I hear what you're saying. What are you afraid of? What need are you concerned about right now? Because then you direct the conversation. Because so often the barrage of abuse is like, it's a quite generic abuse as well. Like, you suck. How could you do this? Blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, what are you trying to achieve right now? What are you trying to get at? What need are you trying to meet? What are you afraid of? Like, I get that there's you're saying there's something that's at risk right now. Tell me what's at risk and I'll take care of it. And that, as said, it does sound ridiculous. I'm well aware of how ridiculous this sounds. And this is something that has worked for me. It's worked for Serena, and it's worked for innumerable clients who have gone through the same process. So anything else you want to say about the inner critic before I get to the inner saboteur? Mm-mm. So the inner saboteur is, as said, it often is quite distinct from the inner critic. The inner critic is basically, I'm trying to get this need met and I'm using a really shitty strategy, generally of negative verbal, negative insults and negative self-talk to try to get you to meet this need. The inner saboteur is slightly different, and putting a needs lens on it, you'll start to see the difference. The inner saboteur is, I'm going to try and get this need met by sacrificing other needs. And it's like, I'm not even, whether there is a conscious awareness of that, a lot of the time that's not a thing, but it's like, I'm going to try and do this, but I'm going to ignore the fact that it's actually sabotaging these needs. So let's use a couple of examples on this. I'm going to try and meet my security need by rejecting any potential relationship that comes along. So I get to feel safe, but it means that my love and connection need is not going to be as well met as it would be if I was able to have relationship. And that doesn't have to even be intimate relationship. It could be friendships as well. Like that, I've seen people. In fact, there was a I don't know whether I shared this on the prior recording of this or on a different episode, but I have a guilty pleasure, which is watching very, very trashy reality TV shows, a lot of the time relating to relationships. I worked as a relationship specialist for 7 years, and from a needs standpoint, they are unbelievable. Like, I'm watching all the needs play out. I'm like, whoa, this is interesting. A lot of content sometimes comes out of those. And I watched one recently where there was a woman who, she had very, very low self-worth. She couldn't believe why a guy would want to be with her. And she was a single mum, and she believed that meant that she was coming with baggage and nobody will want to be with somebody who came with baggage. And she was provided, it was one of these kind of match-up shows, and she was matched up with somebody who was a lot of women's ideal man, like great emotional intelligence, great at communicating, wanted to talk and figure things out, was very supportive, was very understanding. And because of her insecurities and her fear of being rejected, she basically self-sabotaged that entire thing. She made problems that didn't exist. She caused fights out of nothing, and she pushed him away so that she wouldn't feel as rejected as she would have done if she'd gone all in and he'd rejected her, because that's what she expected. So she met her security need in a really crappy way by sacrificing her love and connection need, by sacrificing her emotional experience expression need, actually sacrificing her acknowledgement need, because he was trying to acknowledge her and she just wasn't allowing it at any point. So that's just like one example of how the saboteur like shows up. There's another one that kind of came in and went out. Another one is in terms of like work and career progression progression. A lot of people won't go for a promotion because it will take a hit to their value need if they don't get it. Mm-hmm. So they will take a hit to maybe their growth need, maybe their possibility need, maybe their value need, maybe their security need, so that they don't feel devalued by not getting the job. So they would rather not go for the job in the first place than go for the job and risk not getting it. So, I mean, this happens that's just 2 examples. There are so many examples of this. And the inner saboteur, again, they're so focused. A lot of the time, what will tend to happen with the inner saboteur is they focus on the, understandably so, the lower areas of the tree, and they try to meet those needs with a complete disregard for the needs that are being compromised above that. And that makes sense, because we know that the lower on our needs tree that our needs are compromised, the more vulnerable we are to the ups and downs of life, the more essential it is that our needs are better met at the lower point of the tree. But the problem is that if we meet needs at the lower point of the tree, like it's like saying, well, I'm going to meet the needs of the trunk of my tree by cutting off all the branches. Like put it in those sense, like that doesn't make a whole heap of sense. And a lot of the time it might be because we've had experiences through life where our lower needs have been compromised or have been at risk of being compromised. And because, like, go back to the needs groups, the roots of the tree, the first group of needs is our survival needs. And that is survival. So we will find a way of meeting those needs. And this is why a lot of people will sacrifice other needs to try to get their survival needs met. That is a lot of the time the inner saboteur. And the inner saboteur sometimes can kind of take a similar form to the inner critic, because the inner saboteur will tell you all the things that it thinks you need to hear in order to prioritize that need at the bottom and to sacrifice the ones that are above it. But the approach with this is very, very similar, in the sense that once you kind of have that needs lens on it, it's like, okay, I get what you're doing here, but what need are you trying to meet? What if we tried to meet that need in a different way? What if we approached meeting that need in a way that didn't need to sacrifice all these other needs? So maybe it's not that we don't date any men. It's that we are more discerning with the men that we choose to, like, we build trust slowly over time. It may be that we do our inner work so that we don't feel like if somebody rejects us, which basically all rejection is someone saying we're not a good fit for each other. But because of how we already don't feel good enough because of that value need piece, we end up having, it lands on that, oh, see, there's something wrong with me. We take it as rejection of us, like we're not good enough for this other person. And so maybe we do some work on ourselves to meet those needs, to become more resourced, to become more resilient, so that if those things happen, they don't affect us in the same way as they would, because we heal the kind of past traumas that have caused us to have these vulnerabilities in our tree. So while the inner critic is just as simply, I'm afraid this need is not going to get met, so I'm going to make you feel shitty so that you'll meet it. The inner saboteur is, I'm afraid this need won't get met, and I'm going to sacrifice everything else to get that need met, and I'm going to do things in ways that probably are not going to be supportive to the rest of our needs tree. But from a needs lens perspective, the conversation is very similar. What need are you worried about? Why are you worried about that need? Okay, now it's my responsibility. Now I know what the needs are. Now I know what you're concerned about. Now I have that needs menu, and sometimes with support from somebody who can help and guide you with this, I can now start to take care of those needs and cultivate them in such a way where we don't have to sacrifice other things to get those needs met, where I don't have to be abused in order to get the need met. And it's a subtle difference, but it is an important difference, because it's really important to recognize. Like I had a client once who she had a boyfriend who would stay over at her house pretty regularly. He lived only a few streets away, but he couldn't sleep if there was somebody else in the bed. So rather than saying to him, well, why don't you go back to your place, or why don't you sleep on the couch, or like coming up with an option that worked for both of them, she slept on her own bedroom floor. And the reason for that was because her value need was not at a point where she believed it was as important for her to get her needs met as his, but also, and more importantly, she was so afraid of losing her love need that she was willing to sacrifice personal power, value need, emotional experience and expression, foundation function, because she wasn't sleeping very well on the floor. She was willing to sacrifice a lot of other needs to try to get that need met. And a lot of the times, like when we are growing up, depending on the circumstances, security and love tend to be two of the needs that maybe are shakiest when it comes to the survival needs. We'll get like other needs are also vulnerable further up the tree, but when we're talking from a survival need standpoint, security and love. So those tend to be the ones that are the rulers of the saboteur. The saboteur will try to do, will sacrifice anything to get the security need met or anything to get the love need met, because we're trying to make up for the fact that we've never really felt secure or we've never really felt loved, and we will do anything. I mean, we've seen so many clients who have allowed really inappropriate things because they are so desperate to keep their love need being met, and it's not really being met. It's just there is somebody around who is saying I love you, even if their behavior isn't following suit. And if you haven't ever felt love, then having somebody say I love you is better than having no one at all. That's the internal rationale. Whereas in actual fact, if you can find a different way of meeting that need, you no longer need someone to be saying that who isn't treating you with love and respect in a way that's honoring of both parties' needs. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I just want to say, like, you know, kind of giggling to myself as, you know, how silly we must sound to some people that we have these conversations with ourselves and do so quite frequently. Mm-hmm. As we said, the inner critic and the inner saboteur, they are always present. They are part of us. So it's very easy, and especially when I first started down this in this process, in this.
I was going to say, you said always present. No, if they are present, they will remain present. Like, I think that because some people might have an inner critic, but they don't actually have an inner saboteur because that's not one of the ways that they've learned. So it's like, if they're present, they're going to stay there. Like, if you've got an inner saboteur, they ain't going anywhere until you address them. If you've got an inner critic, they aren't going anywhere until you address them. I wouldn't say that they're all there for all people. Not everybody may relate to these, but depending on their own background, history, how their conditioning and how they've internalized those things. So this may not resonate with everybody, but if they are there, they're not going anywhere.
Fair enough. Yes. They don't miraculously appear usually.
Yes.
And
they certainly don't miraculously disappear. That's for sure.
And that's the thing.
That's the key thing. Yeah.
They don't just go away. And the thing is, you can have them to a place where they're like, okay, yeah, I trust your needs menu. Like, we've had all these conversations, and then out of fucking nowhere, it's like, boom. It's like, where the hell did you come from? And it can quickly start that shame spiral down again if you're not like, oh,
well, hold on.
I get you're obviously really upset about something right now, and kind of going back into that process and being gentle with yourself. And if you have a moment where, you know, if the inner critic or inner saboteur is present in you and it takes over, to be like, oh, okay, like that, I don't really like handling things that way anymore. Remember, we do this in a discussion and we figure it out. Like, I just want to say, if you're going through this and you're like, this resonate.
And yes, let me just jump in. And if that part of you is feeling some kind of way, letting them express how they are feeling is a really good way of diffusing some of that charge. Like, okay, tell me what's going on. Okay, anything more? Anything else? And are you sure? Is there anything more? And then you can be like, okay, anything else you want to share? No. Okay, do you want to have a conversation about it now? Let's talk about this, and tell me what it is that you're worried about. Like, sometimes it's that part of us that hasn't been he's feeling something but hasn't been able to express that yet, and it just needs to be heard.
It doesn't feel like it's been heard.
Yes, exactly. Sorry, I just, like, when you were saying about, like, when they're feeling it, I'm like, oh, something else you can add in there.
Yes.
So, carry on.
It's just be gentle with yourself. And remember, it's a human thing. It's something many people deal with. And it takes a lot of work. It takes practice. And it's
okay if it flares up again. Like, that's
the thing. It's okay. And it's not a reason to go back down the spiral and be like, oh, well, I've gotten this far. And like, it's so easy to do. So I just like, just the reminder to be gentle with yourself and
like, go back to the trigger and traumas episode. Remember, we said, like, triggers are things that they indicate traumas, like that something may have triggered that part of us without us even being consciously aware of what it is. It's like, where the fuck did that come from all of a sudden? The other thing is that sometimes there will be points in time where these parts of us might go quiet. Mm-hmm. And the reason they tend to go quiet is because we have other things going on in our lives that are either masking or meeting our needs. So they might go quiet when you get into a new relationship and all of a sudden all your needs are getting met by this other person, not their job, but just by them being around, that your needs might be better met. But then your well-being and that inner critic being quiet is dependent on that other person, which is why it's so important for us to learn how to do this for ourselves and not to be dependent on that other person. It might go quiet because you go through a period where there is you go on vacation, or there's something like there are things that are, or because you're using masking behavior, like we talked about masking behavior in the trauma series. Like go back and listen to that. Those masking behaviors where you're doing things that prevent us from noticing our unmet needs. So sometimes that can mean the inner critic doesn't notice the unmet needs are there as well. So she goes quiet or they go quiet. But the thing about it is that doesn't mean to say that they're going to go away, because the second those needs are unmet, are unmasked, and you can feel that they're unmet again, blah, 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 she's going to like bounce back up to the surface again. So this is a reason that like it's like not that this thing isn't necessarily going to be there all the time. There are going to be like ebbs and flows sometimes, but those ebbs and flows are caused because the circumstances and situations we're in are affecting our needs. If we learn how to meet our needs for ourselves at a base level and consistently keep them met, then that allows that part of us to get quieter. Like I don't know whether you've discovered this, but my inner critic is like borderline non-existent now because of the needs work, because I'm meeting my needs on a regular basis. When I wasn't meeting my needs, my God, she was like a main character. Like she was starring role. She had all the monologues, tap dance routine and everything, jazz hands all the way. But I mean, legitimately, she was a very, very active part of my psyche. And now, like, I can't remember the last time I actually heard from her, but that's because she doesn't need to be like that strategy isn't needed to get my needs met anymore. So there are different ways that I relate to that part of myself differently. We just have that's just another part of me. It's like, okay, but anyone got any unmet needs? Speak up now or forever hold your peace. Then we'll take care of them. So it's like, it doesn't quite work like that, but you get used to kind of understanding, okay, this needs unmet, that needs unmet. Okay, what am I going to do about that? But also, once you're actually meeting your needs consistently through a practice, like that part of you just like, like she chills out. She can go on vacation. She can go and sit and have a cup of tea in the corner and not worry about it anymore.
Because she
Crumpets
wants
and all.
to,
Exactly.
not because she was banished there. I've definitely found that same kind of feeling. And the thing is, when one of them come back with a fury, it's like it actually causes me, because their voice is used to consume, and now it's like maybe a whisper here and there that it's like, okay, yep, that I'm easily able to address. Yeah. But if it comes in out of nowhere and it's loud and yelling and just I tend to take a step back and I'm like, okay, something was severely unmet, and chances are, if it got to the point where all of a sudden this inner critic or this inner saboteur, and usually this is more the inner critic for me, if she's screaming at me about something, it's like, how was I just masking? Like, what was I doing that what was just changed in my world that I thought I was getting my needs met, that I obviously wasn't, because she's spinning out right now. Probably justfully so, in the sense of unmet needs. Yeah. But I use these inner parts of me now as prompts to be like, okay,
what's going on?
Where was I just at? Because I obviously didn't realize it until she showed up pounding at the door like, hey, let me in, we need to talk right fucking now. Like, and it's sometimes a shocking, like, or a jarring like, oh shit, I thought you were gone. Like, and then it's like,
where did you come from all of a sudden?
I'm back. Like, and then I invite her in for a cup of tea, and it's like, let's discuss this. And
that's the thing. There's a big difference between being sent into the corner to have a cup of tea by yourself and being invited in for a cuppa and a chat. And that second one is like, whether you have a cuppa, whether you have a glass of water, whether you have a can of seltzer, kombucha, whatever it is you want to drink together. But having that kind of, okay, let's sit down and talk and like let me know. Tell me what's going, because all of these parts of our psyche, they're trying to tell us something. And 99.9999999% of the time, they're trying to tell us about unmet needs. So if we can stop and listen to them and actually hear what they're saying, then we can respond to those needs. And also that, like, if you think about it, this is a part of our psyche. If we are not hearing that part of ourselves, there is a part of us that is not getting our acknowledgement need met because it's not being heard by us, because we're the ones who need to hear it to be able to do something about it. And that's the time when that side of us can start to act up and try and get the needs met from other people. That is not a good, like that, like they end up working in concert with like the different part, like, whoa, no. Okay, hold on. Come here. Let's have a chat. Come here, talk to me. Tell me what's going on.
We've got this. We do not need
no, we don't need any of that. No. Okay, talk to me. And that's the thing, is that when you hear that, when you acknowledge that, that part feels heard, you're feeling heard. That is a part of you that has not been heard, and it's being like it's created this almost like distinct part so that it can be heard. And like sometimes it does seem like we're talking to ourselves. But actually, that's because it's important for us to acknowledge what's going on within ourselves. And sometimes that's the only way that we can kind of get our own attention, to be like, hello, could you just listen for a second? Like, oh, shit, sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Come on, talk to me. Anything else you want to add?
Oh, I'm good.
I think that's it for today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We would love to hear your experience of your inner critics and inner saboteurs, and what beverage and baked good of choice they enjoy eating with over a little chat. Let us know in the comments. But for now, we're just going to say thank you for being here. We really appreciate you. We'll be back soon. And remember, between now and next time, to take care, to stay safe, and remember to continue to meet your own needs. Lots of love. Bye.
Bye, friends.
That's it for today.
If you like what you heard
and would like to see some of Serena's awesome facial expressions,
check out the video podcast on YouTube.
And remember, if your inner critic or inner saboteur are present, they're talking to you about your unmet needs. Take a moment, pause, and listen to what they've got to say.
Well, shit. It really is that simple.